Hello, everyone. Good morning from here. And pardon me for coming in late this morning as I had to attend to some personal issues before I started the session. So please, that is why I'm coming in late this morning. So with that said, welcome you. Kept the US dollar supported at least in the meantime. But at the same political tensions and tariff rate stance are also shaking the market. Now, this mix is making me slowing down, and this obviously adds pressure for eventual Fed cuts. Now, the uncertainty around the tariff deadline, which is July 9th, is also looming. Everyone is bracing up for Trump's next move on tariffs, which could also disrupt trade and hit the sentiment around the US dollar. So the market at the moment is looking a little bit cautious, and this is evident on the chart, as you will see that since the breakout of the resistant line of the descending channel, the market has been a little bit consolidative, confined within that area around the $99.10 level and that breakout structure dollar. So let's see how this is going to be affecting the assets we are monitoring for this week. So with that said, let's delve into the chart. Let's see what is going on. And of course, the first asset we are going to be taking on is the USOILSPOT. So on the USOILSPOT, the momentum had remained bullish since the beginning of the week. Remember, this was what we were looking at the beginning of the week. We had a beautiful ascending trend line. We had our key level at the $70 mark, and of course, you know how we use our key level. As long as price remains above them, we want to look out for patterns and structures that support buying ideas. And when we scale down into our execution level, then a further breakout of the $74.85 area will welcome more buying opportunity, which obviously never happened. Now we saw price break down the support line of that structure here, which triggered a sell, and then that did not last long before buy pressure came in, respecting that ascending trend line. So for me on the USOILSPOT, I'm not really my portfolio on the USOILSPOT is not really positive at the moment, as I had roughly break even on Monday. I didn't trade there, neither did I trade on Thursday. So today I'm looking to see if I can capitalize on what looks like an uptrend scenario after capturing the character of price action since last week Wednesday. As you can see here, after connecting the series of higher lows, we have a beautiful ascending trend line to work with going into today's trading session. And of course, as long as price remains above the ascending trend line, we want to be looking out for patterns and structures that support buying idea. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see that I do have a buy position triggered at the moment. Can you see that clearly? Let me see. Okay, so if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that I have a buy position triggered already, which is roughly in profit. We still don't know if this momentum will be valid for today. And the reason why I bought this was from a technical standpoint, price remains above that ascending trend line. But if we look at things from a fundamental perspective, you would not follow the news. The Middle East conflict scenario is still very, very much on the table. Israel airstrike on Iranian military targets, and of course nuclear related sites still pose a threat of escalation, which could trigger supply disruption fears and of course support oil prices if tension rises again. So this for me is a major trigger that could push the price of oil higher. However, that being said, Trump Trump's narrative about joining the war was truncated yesterday, where he delayed his decision on whether the United States will strike or join the strike on Iran, and saying he will decide within 2 weeks on whether this is going to be geopolitical fears at the moment, and could weigh in on oil prices, at least in the short term. And this might lead to a scenario where price could break down this ascending trend line, or maybe further break down the second one to incite a sell-off. Then if we look at the IEA report, where we saw a higher global supply outlook, IEA is estimating that there will be about an increase in supply by 200,000 barrels per day, signaling that there's going to be more oil available than previously expected. And of course, simple economics tells us that the higher the supply, then the lower, the cheaper the price of the commodity will be. So if the IEA global supply outlook is something to come by, the chances that the oil prices at its resistant line could be in play, and we could see price drop to the downside. So we are at a critical juncture at the moment, and of course the structure here reveals to us, or let me say reflect, the current sentiment in the market, how market participants are thinking. So if I look at things from a technical standpoint, it more or less looks bullish for me. So I have decided that anywhere above the $73.50 level at this point is looking promising to buy the US oil spot, especially after this top is evolving here. And of course, this could see price climb further up to the upside. So that is the narrative that supported my buy position on the US oil spot at the moment. So let's see how far this momentum will go, and if it continues to the upside, then a breakout retest of the $74.85 level will definitely welcome more buying opportunities. So this is basically what I'm going to be using to navigate this market today. Now, in as much as this is the case, if price in any way, if selling pressure in any way comes in and takes us out of this buy position, I want to see price break down and retest the $72.50 level for me to have anyone. So basically the market will be focusing on end of the week trading activity. So let's see how this is going to play out going forward. I wish us all the best of luck as all sports. So if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to let me know in the comment section. So I will take about 5-10 seconds off. Let's see if there are any questions before moving on to the next asset on our watch list. Stay tuned in. All right. So, in the absence of no questions, I want to assume that we are all on the same page. So, we maintain a bullish bias at this juncture. Let's see how this is going to play out. And of course, if anything new comes up, I will obviously update us on my Telegram platform. So I'm going to be around today to trade the market. So definitely I will be updating us as I continue to monitor price action from my hand. So I wish us all the best of luck on the US All Spot. So moving on to the next asset on our watch list. So the next asset we are looking at is the USDJPY, and of course we saw how the price of the US dollar gained some significant momentum right from the beginning of the week, right from the 143.950 all the way into the 145.750, amassing over 150 pips along the way. Now, remember at the beginning of the week, we were having a structure on the 4 hours time frame where we had a beautiful descending trend line after capturing the series of lower highs since sometime in May, as you will see here. And of course, we did talk about the potential of price breaking out of the resistance line to welcome buying ideas. And of course, we said if price continue to maintain pressure, selling pressure below the trend line, it could incite bearish move. And at some point at the beginning of the week, I had a sell triggered at the 143.950, but that move did not last long before I got taken out in a loss, as you can see here. And not until the later part of Monday, price triggered the buy position at the breakout retest of that resistant line of the range bound structure at the 144.750. And of course, we saw price move over, how many pips was that? Over approximately 100 pips for the recent retracement move happen here. And for those of us who took advantage of this opportunity, well done and kudos to you. And as it is right now, it appears that the yen is finding some strength from the increased inflation in the Japanese economic docket, and of course the war tensions, and it's not likely that this trend will continue, especially considering the cautious approach from Japan as regards to whether to raise interest rate or not. So far this week, the dollar had taken advantage of the Fed hawkish pause, that is maintaining the current interest rate where it is, and also saying that they are going to be keeping an hawkish stance and there will be fewer rate cuts projected for this year. Then we also have the threat of 25% tariff on Japanese vehicles and reciprocal levels on other imports, which has a tendency of hurting the Japanese economy. And this has been one of the major drivers of the strength of the US dollar this week, resulting in this ascending trend line from that demand zone we identified on the 4 hours time frame. So we have an ascending trend line in play, and of course you know how we use our ascending trend lines. As long as price remains above them, we want to be looking out for patterns and structures that support buying ideas. Now, if it happens that market leans towards the rising inflation in Japan, and that which gives a strong reason for the Bank of Japan to consider future rate hikes, we could see a scenario where the ascending trend line is breached and broken to the downside to incite a sell-off, maybe back into this trend line that was broken at the beginning of the week to form what I would call a retest of structure, maybe in an attempt to continue the uptrend move, or drop below it to incite more selling ideas. And if you look at the distance between where price is right now, the trend line, and that structure, we are talking about approximately 140 pips. So let's see, how do we intend to capitalize on this one? So I think we have a support line here around the 145.250 level. So right here, 145.250 level, and I already have a buy position triggered already. If you look at the bottom of your screen, I have a position which is currently running in a small size loss at the moment. So I will put the stop loss of this buy position at 145.100, which is way below the current support line we just identified now. So let me just put at 145.100, and I would like to place a sell stop order below the 145.250, because there is a strong tendencies for price to break down both this ascending trend line and that 145.250 level. So I already placed a sell stop order below the structure. So if this trend line is unable to maintain bullish pressure, then a breakdown retest of the structure could see price drop into the 143.800 area. So I will place my TP target around the 143.800. That's for the sell position, as you can see here. And then if price goes ahead to break out of the 145.750, then that will welcome more buy positions. So this is where our center of focus is going to today. We have a range bound structure captured for the last 24 hours here. So we have a scenario where price may respect the trend line to continue. That is the idea behind the current buy position you see at the bottom of your screen. But if this level gets broken to the downside, then this could trigger a sell position. So let's see what happens in the next couple of hours, since there are no major event to look out for to decide what will happen next. So the Japanese yen strength may rise on war tensions or fresh inflation talk, but we are not going to ignore that the Bank of Japan is having a slow approach in implementing this. So we look for short-term bullish spike on news if there are any news of such, and then we need to be also cautious on holding long-term Japanese yen positions without clear Bank of Japan's action. So that is basically what we are looking at today. If you have any questions as regards to the current setup or as regards to any of the things I've said today, feel free to let me know in the comment section. So I will take another 5-10 seconds off. Let's see if there are any questions before we move on to the final asset on our watch list for today. Stay tuned in. All right. So, in the absence of no questions, I guess we are all on the same page, right? And I hope you duly marked out the structures accordingly. It's a simple trading setup. We have a range bound structure of an ascending trend line, which is looking like price will continue the uptrend move, but we are not ignoring the potentials that the yen could gain some traction following high inflation in that economy, which could see price drop and break down both the trend line and the support line of the range bound structure. So I wish us all the best of luck on that one. And if there is anything new, trust me, I will be updating you on my Telegram platform. So moving on to the final asset on our watch list. So the final asset we are looking at is my favorite, and that is the XAUUSD, popularly known as the gold commodity. Those of you who are following me on both my TradingView and Telegram platform, you must have gotten an update as to how we are going to look at what I have here. After connecting the series of lower highs, we have the resistant line of the descending channel, and then the connecting the series of lower lows, we have the support line of that descending channel. And interesting enough, you will see that the support line of that descending channel falls within the 3,345 level, a level which was the of the bullish momentum that started last week. We saw the recent bullish move started around this area. And what does that tell us? It tells us that this area has a strong memory for buying power. And as soon as price dropped into the structure this morning, you saw what we noticed. Buy pressure resumed from that particular area. And of course, in my update this morning on both my TradingView and Telegram platform, I did illustrated on the chart here that we should be buying a reversal setup from here, and that is basically the reason behind the current buy position you can see at the bottom of your screen, which is currently running with about 80 pips there, about 80 to 90 pips thereabout, which is quite impressive for those of you who took advantage of that move. Well done and kudos to you. So as it is right now, I think the path of least resistance for gold still remains to the upside, thanks to the geopolitical tension in the Middle East. Like I said earlier, the ongoing strikes between Iran and Israel. Now it's going into, I think, the 8th day right now, and this will continue to raise fear of a broader war, keeping safe haven demand alive. And besides that, Trump's tariff threats on the pharmaceutical sector and the July 9 Liberation Day tariff deadline are also unsettling global markets, which, of course, you know, in global uncertainty like this, gold usually thrive. And then to injury is the weakening of the US dollar. And of course, as long as the dollar is weak, gold becomes more attractive for foreign investors. And for me, I still strongly believe, at least for the meantime, that gold remains bullish, and we could see price maybe go to as far as the resistant line of that descending channel I spotted earlier. So we are looking at over 150 pips more to catch. So placing a TP around the 3,370 is looking promising. And of course, if price goes and take out retest that resistant line of the descending channel, we might be in for another wave of bullish momentum. So let's place our TP for this buy position at the 3,370. I will do that right away. And for those of you who were part of this buy position we took this morning, I would advise that we move stop losses to secure some profits from this current position. So I would want to scale down to the 15 minutes time frame to see where I can put my stop loss on this one. So let me put around the 3,350. Yes, 3,350 is looking 3,351 area at least for now. So I'll place my stop loss right there, secure the current position so that even if price drops to the downside, we would not be taken out in a loss. The worst case scenario will be at break even. So I continue to maintain a bullish bias on the XAUUSD thanks to weakening US dollar, trade related uncertainty, and of course tensions in the Middle East. However, if the market continued the profit taking that started this week, gold may set to end the week lower than where it is right now, indicating that traders may continue to secure gains. And if that is going to be the case, we may likely see price break down that 3,345 key level. I will show you that on the 1 hour time frame. I don't know why my chart is taking some time to load up. Let's give it a couple of seconds. So the 3,345 level, which I updated, okay, this is it right here, which I said has a potential, a strong memory for buying power. So if price can break down and retest the structure, we might be in for another leg of bearish move. So that is basically what I'm looking at today. And of course, based on this narrative, you will see how important the 3,345 level is. Depending on how market participants react to this level will determine whether we will be holding a buy or sell position. So we are holding a buy at the moment, but if we get taken out, price drops below the 3,345, retest it, then that will be a trigger for selling ideas. So let's see how the market will play on this area, and I will of course be updating us accordingly on both my TradingView and Telegram platform. So that there you have it, my simple view into the XAUUSD market. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comment section. So I'll take another 5-10 seconds off while I wait for your questions, and before we start rounding off on today's Forex Morning Mastery. Stay tuned in. All right, everyone. I guess in the absence of none, we have come to the end of today's Forex Morning Mastery. Great moment with you guys. I enjoyed every single moment, and of course, throughout the session, we were able to deliberate on the 3 financial instruments that we are monitoring, which includes the USOILSPOT, the USDJPY, and of course the XAUUSD, where we were able to identify simple trading setups that we are going to be using to navigate the market today. And so far for today's session, at least we are doing pretty well. USOILSPOT is running with about 30 pips in profit. Gold is running with about 50 pips in profit, while the USDJPY's buy position is still struggling to gain some traction. So let's see how the market is going to play out today. Of course, I will be updating us accordingly on both my TradingView and Telegram platform. And for those of you who joined us for the first time today, I hope you are able to gain one or two things from what we talked about. If you did, you want to be part of our subsequent editions, trust me, the more time you spend with us, the better you get to comprehend my analytical approach. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you are yet to do so, as I will be updating us during the course of the weekend on my plans for next week, especially on the gold commodity. And if I have enough time, I will be sharing some insight on the USDJPY as well. Then on Sunday, we are going to be running the Forex market prep Sundays evening.